Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. You are now listening to The Right Side. I am your host, Jeff Doggett, coming to you on the greatest station in the nation, from the greatest location in the nation. Shout out to everybody listening to us as far north as Kennebunkport, Maine, as far south as Key West, Florida, as far east as Staten Island, New York, and as far west as Stockton, California, and all the points in between. For those of you that are listening to us around the world, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever greeting best suits the time zone you are in. There are several things that you can do to stop the spread of respiratory diseases like COVID-19. Number one, wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with warm soap and water. Now, if you do not know what 20 seconds are, then sing happy birthday to yourself. And when that song is completed, you have reached 20 seconds. Number two, wipe down frequently touched items and objects with some type of disinfectant. Number three, please carry inside your car with you some type of sanitizer so that when you go to the gas station to pump your gas, since you do not know who touched the pump prior to you, you can use that sanitizer to get the germs off of your hands. Number four, when you are in a enclosed area like a mall or a church or an arena or a theater, whatever the case may be, please wear your mask. And please, if you can, continue to social distance. And if you haven't got the vaccine yet, please consider doing that as well. And this was brought to you by this station, No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise, the National Association of Broadcasters, and we are sponsored by Google and Lamont Avenue Wines. Secondly, if you are in the Cleveland area, on the first or third Saturday of each month, I've got some great news for you. On the first and third Saturday of each month at 6812 Woodland Avenue, they are giving away a free bag of groceries. Now listen, here's the great thing about it, folks. You do not have to show proof of residence. You do not have to show proof of income. We got a caller. Caller, just wait 1 second, caller. We'll be right with you in just a moment. Just hang on. We're glad to have you call. Hang on for just a moment. You do not have to show proof of income. You do not have to show proof of residence. The only thing you have to show is up, in that you show up. And you will get a free bag of groceries. Not only do you get the free bag of groceries, but you also get free clothing for both adults and children. So you get free groceries, you get free clothing. Now that would be great if that was all that took place. But it's even more than that, because in addition to the free bag of groceries and the free clothing for both adults and children, if you are there between 11:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m., you get a free hot lunch. And listen, this is a home-cooked hot lunch. This is not some warmed over, thrown together something. So you can't beat that, folks, with a hockey stick. You get free clothing, you get free groceries, and you go home with a full stomach with a good home-cooked meal. Where and when do you say this is again? I'm glad you asked. It's the first and third Saturday of each month at 6812 Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And we want to shout out Major Care Ministries, the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, and Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, who houses this event. So those of you that are new to this show, this is what we do each week. We talk politics, we talk sports, and the issues of the day. I throw out the topics, I give my take on those topics, and we invite you to call at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. When we have a guest in studio, however, we cater that time to the area of expertise of the guest that we have. And today, we have in studio with us during our first hour, we have Mr. Vincent E.Stokes, Reverend Vincent E.Stokes. Yes. And Reverend Stokes is a candidate on the Democratic primary, in the Democratic primary for the 22nd district in the state of Ohio for Congress for the state of Ohio in that 22nd district to represent that district in Columbus. The primary is this coming Tuesday, August the 3rd. So we encourage everyone within that district, well, we encourage everyone, period, to make sure that you go out and vote on Tuesday if you have not already done so, absentee or mail in, however you have chosen to do it. If you still haven't done it yet, please find your polling place, know your polling place, make sure you are registered and eligible to go, and please go out and vote in the primary here in Ohio on this coming Tuesday, August the 2nd. And there's also primaries in other places across this country, so those of you that are listening across the country go out and vote as well. So we do have in studio with us today Reverend Vincent E.Stokes. Reverend Stokes, so glad to have you. Welcome to the right side and welcome to No Static Radio.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the invite.
So glad to have you here. So tell our listening audience, and especially those that could be your potential constituents in the 22nd district here in the state of Ohio, introduce yourself. Tell them, our audience, who is Vincent E. Stokes?
My name is Vincent E. Stokes II, and I am running for state representative in District 22. I am a father. I am a husband. I am a preacher. I am a grandson. My grandmother lives with me. I am a advocate for all things right. I am running for state representative. I got in this race because I saw a need, and in seeing a need, I felt like I could get in this race and make a difference in the community in which I'm a part of. So I got in the fight. When I got in the fight, nobody else was in the district, so I got in the fight and been fighting ever since, trying to make headways, not headlines, just trying to do what I feel called to do, which is to stand up for the least, the lost, and all the left.
Okay, very good. And so this used to be the 12th congressional district here in Ohio, and then they changed it to the 22nd. Do you think that there was a deliberate ploy of deception by the party in control right now in the state house to perhaps confuse voters? I only ask you that question because this district is divided up, especially in the Ward 1 area of Cleveland. One part of Ward 1, certain precincts are voting in your primary, and then another part of Ward 1, those precincts are voting in entirely different candidates in that primary. And do you think this was a deliberate attempt of confusion, or this is just what it just rolled out that way?
No, let me give more context. So the district that I'm in was District 9. It was Janine Boyd's district.
Okay.
And they amalgamated the district from District 9 and got part of District 12. And that's how we got this new District 22. You're absolutely correct. They took, well, the other candidate in the race, they took part of her district, a very small part of her district, and put it in Janine Boyd's district. It was done strategically. It was done strategically not just in this area, but done strategically in other areas where other state representatives had term limited out, they had term limited out. So it happened also in former Stephanie House's district. As you know, Stephanie House resigned and went to city council,
right.
And they put Shayla Davis was the appointed person in that district. Shayla Davis did not file to run in that district, and Sandra Williams was going to run in that district. And when Sandra Williams decided not to run in that district, they amalgamated that district into another district. So as to get rid of, they didn't get rid of one representative, they got rid of two representatives from our area, really three. If you think about how they gerrymandered Terrence Upchurch district as well. So it's very gerrymandered in Cleveland, and the black vote is very saturated in 2 to 3 districts, and they did that purposely downstate because they don't want our voices to be heard. You know, Cleveland is a very progressive city. We have progressive thinking representatives who go downstate who stand up and fight for that which is right. So their idea is if we put them all in one district, we can get rid of some people, and they did that successfully, and it was done purposely to keep our vote from having the full impact that it could have.
Exactly, and um, for our listening audience that may be outside of the state of Ohio, the Republicans control the House and the Senate in the state of Ohio, and as Mr. Stokes just stated, they gerrymandered these districts, and so much to the point where the Supreme Court in the state of Ohio ruled that what they were doing was unconstitutional, and uh, they had to submit new maps and new districts by a certain time. So we can see exactly what is going on here. And not only here in Ohio, but we've seen it in other states throughout the country, as we've talked about on this show before, too. So, as a candidate for Congress in this 22nd district here in Ohio, what do you see are the major issues that confront this district?
I'm okay. I want to clear something. I'm candidate for state representative.
State representative, right.
We have a great congresswoman and Congresswoman Brown. So,
Right.
In my district, one of the a major issue is ed choice, and that is directly related to how schools are funded. I think that's a district issue. What I also believe is a district issue, but also a state issue, is women's right to choose. With the overturning of Roe versus Wade with the Dobbs decision last month, that's a state issue, but it trickles down into the district. In the district, I would also say not just as equitable school funding, but Medicaid. When you think about an aging population, and you have older people who live in this district, and how Medicaid is dispersed. So if you do not have, if you make too much money, you can't get any Medicaid, right? And most of the families, because my grandmother who lives with me actually falls in this category, she makes just enough to get by. Unfortunately, it's sad, serious of it, but she makes just enough to get by. And if someone, let's say, someone makes $200 more than her, and they're trying to get Medicaid, they would now be ineligible, or ineligible rather, because they make too much money. And then you think about them trying to pay for the medicine, trying to pay rent continues to go up, trying to pay for groceries. It's just not enough. So I think Medicaid, extending Medicaid and the poverty level for Medicaid, I think is a very important issue. Taxes. I live in University Heights. I grew up in Cleveland Heights. I have family in Shaker Heights. We pay some of the highest taxes in the state, not even in the city, in the state. So when we're talking about high taxes, again, which goes back to how schools are funded, I think it's not only unethical, but again, the Ohio State Supreme Court in 1997 ruled that it's unconstitutional that we are funding schools only through property taxes. So I think that's another major issue that we're dealing with in District 22.
You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure don't bring the noise. We have in studio with us Vincent E.Stokes, candidate for representative in the 22nd district in the state of Ohio. Mr. Stokes, you hit on like several things right there that even I can identify with. I too live in University Heights. I am recently retired. As of yesterday was my last day, and so therefore,
congrats.
Thank you. And I'm going to start to receive Medicaid. So the bill that finally we got Senator Manchin from West Virginia to agree on, is that going to affect, assuming that it will get passed, assuming that Senator Sinema will be on board so that the Democrats can have the 50 votes and that they can carve out the filibuster for it, will that help address the Medicare issue at all, or no? As far as prescription drug costs, because that was one of the proponents in the bill that they were talking about, as far as prescription drug costs.
It's a comprehensive bill. I've not had the opportunity to sit down and read the entire bill, but reading sound bites and bits and pieces. It's supposed to be a bill that is supposed to be able to support not only working class but some of our senior members of our community. If done with fidelity and passes, I think it will be something that will support more. We'll say that will support more that demographic and support our citizens who really need those. We're not even gonna call them entitlements. Need those subsidies, if you will.
Right.
They really need them. My grandmother's one of the people who need them. I have many of cousins who need them, and I think if passed, and I do believe it's going to pass, I think if passed, it will support that community and it will support us. And the truth of the matter is when our seniors are doing well, our seniors are able to live healthy lives in their homes, healthy lives in their community. They're going to also spend money in the community, which continues to keep the community going. And I think it's very important that we continue to strengthen our seniors and our youth.
I agree. So on a state level, if you are elected, given the fact that the majority, at least for this time anyway, um, will be from the other party, from the Republican Party, how is it that you think you will be able to work with the other side in order to get this type of legislation passed that will deal with Medicaid and Medicaid for seniors to here in the state of Ohio?
I think it's very important that we work together. I went to Cleveland Heights High School, and the theme in 2003's class for student government, I was on student government from high school, was working together works. And I think that's a very true statement. And I think it's important that we do work together. And oftentimes we approach politics, especially partisan politics, with the mindset of the other party is incorrigible, right? Like they're unable to be worked with. And in some instances, they are unable to be worked with. But in some instances, you are able to work with them because the truth of the matter is, as much as we have seniors in our neighborhoods and in our demographics who are struggling, they have some in theirs as well. And I think it's just important that we just come to the table with common ground, come to the table with the mindset of working together, and come to the table with the mindset of doing what's best for Ohioans and not what's best for party. And oftentimes that's what gets in the way. We want to do what's best for the party versus what's best for Ohioans. And in doing that and working together with them and in being unapologetic in our stance, but willing to make some compromises, I think is the key. And when all else fails, and I have done this with a myriad of groups, you get people to organize and you get them to come downstate. You get them to come to committee meetings. You get them to write testimonies. You get them to speak in committee meetings, and you get them to speak out against whatever injustice you feel is being wrought in those moments. And I have seen it work. I have seen agendas change as a result of organized people coming downstate. So I think that's how we get it done. You work with them, and when it's unable to work with them, you organize with your constituents, and you get them to come downstate, and you get them to speak on record, and get them to talk to them on record. And if they go on record with the vote, then you use that record and you run against them.
If you have any questions for Mr. Stokes, you can call in at 216-939-5087. 216-939-5087. Mr. Stokes, you mentioned in the opening about the Dobbs decision regarding Roe v. Wade. How big of an issue in your particular district is this? Is this something that's a big issue with your constituents? Is it on the back burner? Where's the pulse of the people in your potential district regarding this?
I think it's a very big issue in my district, not just my district, but in the entire state of Ohio, right? Soon after the Dobbs decision was handed out, we saw on the news how a 10-year-old who had been raped, because the reality is a 10-year-old cannot consent to sex. So a 10-year-old was raped, was 10 weeks pregnant, I believe, and was unable to get an abortion in the state of Ohio. I had to go to the next state of Indiana. So, that becomes a rallying call for what could come down the pipeline, right? The Republicans have said, oh, no, we're not going to be that kind of state. But they continue to prove time and time and time again that they're going to legislate against body autonomy and women reproductive rights. I think it's a very important issue in the district in which I'm running in. It's an important issue because people frame it around a woman's right to choose. The framework in which I operate in is it's body autonomy, right? So it's the woman's body or the man's body. It's about having access or having control over one's own body, having agency over one's own body, and being able to utilize your body in how you deem is appropriate for you and appropriate for your family and appropriate for the world in which you're trying to sculpt around you. So I think it's a very important issue, and it's an issue that once it came down, it's an issue that I went downstate, went downstate, organized with the organization, went downstate, and went down and rallied against it because it's a very important issue.
And just for point of information, there were many within the Republican Party here in Ohio that denied that the rape of that 10-year-old girl even took place.
Wow.
Until it was exposed that yes, it did happen. That was going on as well. So you being a minister of the gospel, how do you deal with it when people would ask you, well, Mr. Stokes, you're a minister of the gospel. How do you weigh that against your stand regarding Roe versus Wade? How would you answer that question?
I'm a Baptist and a good Baptist at that. The very foundation of my denomination is rooted in separation of church and state. So when we look at Roger Williams being exiled from Massachusetts, going to start the Rhode Island Bay Colony, we see him being excommunicated because what did he not want to do? He did not want to conform to the religion of the day. He wanted to be able to express his own religious belief, and in doing so, he didn't want to be exiled. He didn't want to be called out for it. So he started a colony rooted in separation of church and state, which became a part of the founding documents of this country. I am a firm believer in my faith is my faith, and I'm going to stand firm in my faith. But when it comes to public policy, when it comes to looking at the United States Constitution, for me, especially with a law background and reason, I look at it through a lens of what is the meaning in which these founding fathers were trying to say, beyond what they're trying to say. What is the zeitgeist or the spirit of the time in which we live today? So when I look at a decision like Roe versus Wade, I do believe that all life is sacred. I do believe that humans should not kill anybody, whether that is in the electric chair, which people don't often make the correlation with when you talk about pro-life with the electric chair. I don't think we should be killing people in the electric chair. But when we talk about a woman's body, for me, again, it has been sculpted around the idea that it's the woman's right to choose what she does with her body. And if I don't, as a Christian, don't want an abortion, I shouldn't get one. But I shouldn't impose that upon other people who might not have that belief. And I think the separation of church and state is very good in regards to that.
You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. We have in studio with us candidate for representative in the 22nd district here in the state of Ohio, Vincent E. Stokes. Mr. Stokes, one of the biggest issues that I see, not only in the African American community, but America period, is gun violence. We have a plethora of mass shootings. We saw just last night in your district on 154th Street in the Lee Harvard area, 36-year-old man was murdered there on the street. 30-year-old one was sent to the hospital. And so we have this just proliferation of guns all throughout this country, where we have more guns in the country than we do people. So, A, do you see gun violence as a huge issue, not only in America, but particularly in the district that you hope to represent? And B, if you are elected, what types of steps or measures would you take to try to introduce and hopefully get past some sensible gun legislation here in Ohio?
So I got in this race as a result of gun violence. I took some of my students downstate on November 17th, 2021. And unbeknownst, we went to see how laws were made in the State House. Unbeknownst to me or them, it was actually the day in which the House was voting on House Bill 99, which is the bill that arms teachers, right? I'm a teacher in Cleveland Metropolitan School District. I work every day. I make my money old-fashioned way. I go to work. And in going to work, I deal with students on a daily basis. And the students in which I deal with the trauma of gun violence every day. So we get downstate, we get there, we go through the process. They ended up passing House Bill 99. And it was on the ride back that one of my students was like, Dr. Stokes, does this mean that we're going to have guns in our classroom? And I had to be honest with him. I said, this bill is more than likely going to pass. It's a Republican-led bill. I said, but I do all that I can do to ensure that we are safe in our classroom, ensure that our doors are locked. And it was that pushed me into wanting to run for state representative again. Two of my students had been murdered. One walking from the Boys and Girls Club down on East 55th Street, shot 16 times. He wasn't even 16 years old. Worked really hard with Councilman Cleveland, then Councilman Gray, and eventually Councilman Starr was the one that pushed it over in Ward 5, and we got a street renamed after him because of him being murdered. Another one of my students was, again, from 5th Ward, murdered, shot in the heart by another one of my students. So my students deal with gun violence on a daily basis. It is something what I'm very passionate about. Not only my students, I've had to deal with gun violence in my own personal life in regards to family. It's a very important issue. And when we look at the terrain of District 22, which goes from East Cleveland all the way to Warrensville, right? So East Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, University Heights, Shaker Heights, Warrensville Heights, Highland Hills, North Randall, and parts of Ward 1. The part that you said on 154th is not actually in District 22. Okay. It was in the old district, District 9. It was in the old district. But that is in First Ward. When we look at the terrain of District 22, there are a myriad of issues, right? So East Cleveland issues are not Cleveland Heights issues, and we recognize that. And Cleveland Heights issues are not Warrensville issues. But what we do know is gun violence is an issue throughout the entire district. Exactly. Because if they're shooting in East Cleveland, it's not going to stop the bullets from for people and mindsets and bullets and guns. It's not going to stop when it gets to Shaker Heights. It's not a shield that says we don't shoot in Shaker, right? It's an issue that we really need to look at. And if you're talking about going downstate, as House Bill 99 has already passed, we need to be passing other bills that counter House Bill 99. We need to be, again, advocating. I went down a few months ago, last month actually, Honesty in Education, another PAC fighting against not only the House Bill 99, but the Don't Say Gay bill, just utilizing these organizations, Ohio OAE, Ohio Teachers Association, looking at American Federation of Teachers, all these various organizations who will work with you and lobby with you to work towards repealing a House Bill 99, work with you towards making legislation about gun laws, because there's no reason in my mind ever for a semi-automatic gun to be in anybody's hand. There is no reason why someone should have access to a lethal weapon that's able to kill multiple people with multiple rounds in the span of seconds. It should be illegal in the state of Ohio. It should be illegal. I'm not talking about taking away people's gun rights. It's a Second Amendment right that was etched in stone by the founding fathers of this nation in 1789. I agree that it's a right, but it's some rights that need to have parameters around them, right? So that's why I said I think we need to really work together with our constituents, because we know that the Republicans are not trying to have this type of fight. They're not trying to have this type of legislation. So the only way we're going to stop that type of legislation or shift that type of legislation is, like I said before, getting people to go downstate to lobby, and not only lobby, to agitate. In the words of Frederick Douglass, agitate, agitate, agitate.
Yes, so correct. And you're preaching to the choir here, and I'm preaching because we talk about, as a matter of fact, in the second hour of our show today, one of the topics I'm going to talk about is the recent report that showed in the recent hearings on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, where it came out that the gun makers in this country combined made $1 billion in profits just selling automatic weapons, and not to the military, but to average everyday citizens. And to your point, these weapons, these AR-15s and AR-1s and AR-14s, now they're marketing, it was shown that in that hearing, they're marketing AR-14s, which is the scaled down version of the AR-15, to children. And so the fact, as you said, these are military weapons that are designed for combat, for soldiers who are in combat to inflict as much as casualties on the enemy as possible so that it will save them and their fellow soldiers' lives if at all possible. This was not meant to be, and I've heard so many weak and lame arguments for it. Well, I heard a Republican congressman from Louisiana said, well, people in Louisiana use them to hunt feral hogs, well, to kill feral hogs. Well, before there was assault weapons and during the assault weapons ban, they were still killing those feral hogs with shotguns and other types of weapons. So this is just a bogus and horrible argument, and this is a bogus and horrible situation, especially when you have the facts on your side that between 1994 and 2004, when we did have the assault weapons ban, there was a 40% drop in mass shootings. And so it just makes sense, and that's probably why we don't have it. So this, but it is something that we need to do. So you being in the education field and being a teacher, if elected, what are some of the type of reforms that you would like to bring or to see to education here in the state of Ohio, especially when it comes to public education?
Well, one thing, I'll start with this, is how public education is funded.
Okay.
Again, the Ohio State Supreme Court has ruled that it's unconstitutional how we're currently funding education. And how we are currently funding education is through property taxes, which is one reason why our property taxes continue to go up. And we inadvertently...
Trust me, in University Heights, I know.
Let me tell you,
yes.
We just got a bill.
Yes.
And the truth of my grandmother bought a house in Cleveland Heights in 1972, first black on her street. When my grandfather died, my grandmother retired. She ended up losing her house because she was taxed out of her house. She got caught up in the predatory lending. Then the taxes just continued to go up, go up, go up. And the truth of the matter is we push seniors and we push those who have brought homes and may have become disabled for whatever reason, no longer have the same income. We push them out of their houses as a result of how schools are funded. So I certainly I certainly know we need to change how schools are funded. The state has $18 billion in the rainy day fund. They can fund education, and they need to come up with a formula that is legal, a formula that does not require it be on the backs of the homeowners. So that's the first thing I would do in public education. I would change how it's funded. Another thing I would do in regards to public education is this is a big issue, well, everywhere. When you talk about Ed Choice grants, if you don't know, are the grants in which people get, let's say, you don't like the school district in which your child is in, your child is in a school district that has let's say the school has an F, because school has to have an F. You can now get a grant to pay for your child to go to another school. Often those schools are private schools, parochial schools, or charter schools, right? Charter schools, you don't necessarily need a grant. You just send your child to charter school, and the money follows the child. In the private schools, they have to pay for it, and you use the Ed Choice grant. So when the money leaves the school district, let's say I don't like Cleveland Heights City, University Heights City School District. I don't want my child to go to Wiley is closed, so I don't want my child to go to Monticello. I want my child to go to Monticello, and I don't think Monticello has an F, but let's say Monticello has an F. And I can utilize this Ed Choice grant. I'm going to send my child to St. Vincent's, since my name is Vincent. I'm going to send my child to St. Vincent's Middle School. making this up as I make the schools up. I now can get an Ed Choice grant. My grant now takes the money from the public school district, which we have a requirement under the state constitution to fund. Money comes from them. Money now goes to a parochial school, right? There's no issue with sending your child to a parochial school. The issue is when you take the money from the school district that is required by law to educate all students. So we're taking money from the school district and putting it in another space. And I know Ed Choice grants are decimating school districts. I live in Cleveland Heights University High City School District, live in University Heights. I went to Cleveland Heights University High Schools. I see how, I have a son in the 12th grade. I see how the money being siphoned away from the school district and being placed in other schools is hurting our district and hurting the finances of our district. That's the second thing I would do. The third thing I would do, I am a teacher. I teach just 3 blocks from here over on 30th and Central. That's where I teach. I teach, and I enjoy teaching. I love teaching. I love my students. But the reality is that people often say, you teach on 30th and Central. Ooh, those kids must be bad. The truth of the matter is children are children everywhere. And all children are struggling with social emotional behaviors that are manifested as a result of traumas that they engage on a daily basis. Whether that trauma is in their home with domestic violence, whether that trauma is on their phone, and you see constantly see in these news reels, people constantly killing people. Trauma is real, and trauma and is accessible to our scholars. So one of the things that I would love to do and would sponsor is a bill that would require social emotional learning in all schools. It needs to be a core part of the curriculum. You take English, math, science, social stuff, you need social emotional learning where you are learning about who you are, teaching them those very needed soft skills that they are lacking in so many ways. I currently have my students working on my campaign. I wouldn't work summer school, so I could pay them to work on my campaign. And they're building their soft skills in talking to people and campaigning on my behalf. We work together. But it is a needed thing. Social emotional learning is very important. It's now a standard in the state of Ohio, social emotional learning. But we need to move it beyond just being a standard. It needs to be a class where it is taught, where it's a required core to graduate. Not only do we need that, we need counselors. We need school-based counselors in every school in the state of Ohio. My school does not have a school-based counselor, although we have counseling services from community counselors. I think it's important that we have some school-based counselors who are in the building daily, not in addition to something like a beach group. So I think we need both and, not and or. So those are the 3 things that I would
do. And to your point too, let's just be honest. It's just keep it real, keep it a buck, as the kids say. When these funds are taken away from the public school systems, they affect primarily, I won't say exclusively, but primarily children of color, because the majority of the school districts are made up of children of color, which can lends into the whole theory and pipeline that the schools are being used as a pipeline to the prison system. The other thing too, when it comes to education, and how do we get this out here? What you just said, well, if you're elected, you would definitely get it there. But how do we shift the discussion from what really is going on, which you just so eloquently laid out before us? So we need to shift the conversation to that, from this whole culture war that primarily, well, exclusively are being led by the Republican Party and those elected officials about CRT, critical race theory, which is not even being taught in any school system in America, be it elementary, middle, or high school, or even on the university level. It's being taught in law school. So how do you shift the conversation from this diversionary tactic to what's really real, what you just laid out before us?
So CRT, critical race theory, is a red herring being utilized, especially with propaganda, to get people to push back against this push of diversity and inclusion that has been a big push, especially since the killing of George Floyd, right? And they utilize the critical race theory as the red herring to say we don't want our children to learn about these aspects of race to make our children feel uncomfortable, right? But if we are telling history through a lens of liberation in general, right? If we tell the history of America, we cannot tell the history of America and wash it in such a way that we leave out the people who are already here, right? So when you talk about the original sin of America, the original sin of America is Thomas Jefferson in Hypocrisy wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator by certain inalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." He writes that in the founding documents of this country, while simultaneously holding in bondage African humans. He does that. We talk, unless we're going to tell the truth about the issues in America, unless you face it, you will never be able to fix it. And the truth of the matter is, when they talk about critical race theory from that lens, they're talking about not wanting to be outed by their ancestors and or be outed by themselves, because some of them have worn blackface when they were in college, and now they don't call me out in regards to that, or don't call out my ancestors. Don't tell me that my great grandfather was a racist. If your great grandfather was upholding to racist theories, your great grandfather was a racist, and we need to listen. It's not saying that you're racist. It's owning that your great grandfather was one, and recognize that him being a racist and him living in that type of dispensation at that time gave him power and privilege that it did not afford to certain groups of people. It did not afford to black men. Was not afforded to black women. It was not afforded, honestly, to white women, right? So when you talk about 1919. Until you talk about the vote of women, it's not until 1920 that women are able to vote. The African slave the African male is able to vote before the white female. So when we're talking about critical race theory, what we're really talking about, in my perspective, as a teacher and as a person who teaches through a lens of liberation, I'm talking about being honest about the reality of what happened in this nation, right? So school will start on August 22nd or August 28th. In my classroom, in my school, we're going to talk about the three important events that occurred on August 28th. Martin Luther King gives his March on Washington some 7 or 8 years after the death of Emmett Lewis Till, who gets killed on August 28th in Money, Mississippi. On August 27th, 1963, in Accra, Ghana, you have someone like W.E.B. Du Bois dying, and you're talking about a 93-year-old legend. We're going to talk about that in the context of what occurred in America. What is the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time, in which King is giving a "I Have a Dream" speech, where he's talking about his little girls and his children holding hands with white children, be able to live out the credence of this nation, right? We love to talk about that part, but we never want to talk about when King says earlier, we have come here to cash a check that has been marked insufficient funds. He's saying the vaults of justice in America are not bankrupt, but when it comes to people that are brown and black, they are. So when we're talking about critical race theory, they want to use King when it's convenient for them. They want to use blackness when it's convenient for them. Now everyone wants to use hip-hop as a way of getting people to buy their products. But we need to talk about the times in which you all scrutinized and also made these things devilish, right? We had people who, letter from Birmingham jail, you had 8 white preachers telling King he was wrong for coming.
Exactly. That's why he wrote the letter. And to your point, just looking at my educational experience, I learned about the Boston Massacre in elementary school, which I should have. That's part of history. I'm not saying that's wrong. I did not learn about Tulsa until I took a Black Studies course when I was a student at The Ohio State University. I never learned about the Trail of Tears, but I did learn about the so-called Little Bighorn Massacre. I didn't learn about Elaine, Arkansas, or the Red Summer of 1919 until I was a senior in high school and took a Black History class. So the fact is, all we're saying is teach the whole story. Teach the entire history. We're not asking you not to, or only to teach certain aspects of it. Just tell the entire story.
Right.
And no pun intended, stop trying to whitewash history. Just tell the truth. John chapter 8, verse 32. And then you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free.
Okay.
So yes, that's all we're saying here. You mentioned gender. It transitions me into the next thing I want to talk to you about, especially when it comes to this campaign. You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. Our call-in number is 216-939-5087. 216-939-5087. We have in studio with us candidate for the 22nd, represent the 22nd district in Columbus, Vincent E. Stokes. Gender. There was a poll just this week by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Now, this is not regarding your race, but I think this is something that's very, very germane to what we're talking about here today. And that poll showed that among Democratic voters, that Reverend Raphael Warnock had overwhelming support, both black and white Democratic voters, male and female, both black and white. However, when it came to the gubernatorial race and also the Secretary of State race, where Stacey Abrams is running and a black woman is running against Brad Raffensperger for the Secretary of State, it showed that white women were crossing over to vote. White men, were crossing over to vote for Brian Kemp. It didn't say anything about white women. But alarmingly, it showed that a percentage of black men were also crossing over to vote for Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger. Now, in your particular race, you are the only male candidate in your race. You're opposed by two females. And in addition to that poll, and I talked about last week, we had one of your opponents on, Juanita Brent. I talked to her about this. There was a poll recently that said that 15% of black men were more likely to vote Republican than black women. So on a gender basis, what do you see the issue within the African American community when it comes to voting? Why black men in this particular race in Georgia, I don't know what the numbers are in the race that you're in, but in this particular race in Georgia, only because the AJC did this poll, what do you see as the issue here with black men when it comes to voting for black women in elections?
Whoa, this is deep. I am the only male running in my race. I do recognize that. I'm a friend, more like a brother, who often talks about why he regrets voting the Democratic ticket because he says he doesn't see any real results from Democrats. As a matter of fact, he called me today. I got him a job working in the school district. He's a cleaner in the school district, and he was walking to work, and he said, he called me. He said, I found a gun in the middle of the street. And then he began to talk about how, and these are the Democrats in which we have voted for, it went back to the Democrats. And I had to remind him, how it works is, how democracy works is, you have an issue, you take the issue to the right people, you work through the process. And he's like, when the Republicans come and they ask us, any black folks, he said the Republicans are gonna be real with you. They're gonna be real. We know they don't like us, and we know if they get their vote, they get our vote, they're gonna do bare minimum to get our vote, but they're gonna do something. He says Democrats don't do anything for our vote, and they take our vote for granted. Now this is him. This is a black male who just registered to vote for the first time in 2020, I think it was. Almost 40 years old, first time voting. Voted for President Biden because he was like, oh, anything but Trump. And then after Biden won, and he saw the policies in which he felt like were not aligned to helping black people, right? He's like, what did we vote for him for? Because Ukraine got ... The Asians got ... what have black people got? And I think with the people who I hear talking and they talk like that, it's often because they feel like they have not had a fair chance at life. They feel like they have not the policies that they continue to see come from Washington or come from Columbus or come from downtown does not support them in their journey. And they feel like they feel like the Democrats have not done a good job in supporting them. So that's what I hear. I'm a black male who has voted Democrats in every election since 2004 when I was 18 years old. And even when I thought about voting for a Republican, my mind reminded me that their policies don't align with my values. But that's me. I have a higher level of thinking in regards to politics. But someone who dealing with trauma on a daily basis and they're constantly dealing with it and they see trauma and they see issues and they see all this other stuff and they see that they're like, I'm not interested in the Democratic Party because we've been voting for them and what have they done for me?
And see, Mr. Stokes, I'm glad you said that, and because here's the issue as I see it, and we've talked about it on this program before. It's education. It's not enough. I mean, it's great that you register and that you vote, but it's not enough. You have to educate yourself. One of the things that we try to educate people on this show is that on the federal level, let's just use that as an example. We have a bicameral system. You have the executive branch, you have the legislative branch. The president cannot pass any law
At all.
it has to go and we're just saying this for general purposes. We know you're well aware of how it works. It has to be proposed in the House, has to pass the House of Representatives first, then it goes to the Senate and has to be passed in the Senate. So for all black people who say, well, we voted for these Democrats and they haven't done anything. We didn't. They say, well, they were going to get police reform. We don't have it. They say we're going to get voter rights. We don't have it. The fact is that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed the House, has yet to even see the light of day on the floor of the Senate, let alone be voted on. Mm-hmm. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act passed the House. Here again, did not pass the Senate, didn't even go through the Senate because it's a 50-50 split and Manchin and Sinema would not vote to carve out the filibuster. That's why people have to be educated on the fact that now could the president do something about student loans? Yes, he can write some executive orders, but those executive orders only last as long as that person is in office. So I think what the problem is, especially within the African American community, but American people in general, is that it has to be, one, it needs voter education. Two, you don't get everything in one election. It took more than one election for all this stuff to come down the pipe. So now you just can't throw up your hands and quit, oh, I didn't get it, so forget it, I'm not voting. Or I'm not voting for them because they didn't do what we promised. So let me get off my soapbox and remember that this is your time. But I wanted to ask you to give you this opportunity. What makes you, in your mind, the best candidate to represent the 22nd district there in the State House in Columbus?
I am Vincent E.Stokes II, and I'm running for state representative. What makes me the best candidate out of the other two is I'm the candidate who's willing to fight and be willing to fight, even if it means I have to fight by myself and get you in the fight with me. I grew up in the district. I have worked in the district. I was 2021 Citizen of the Year for University Heights.
No, congratulations.
Thank you for working on the police commissions. I worked with them on that. I live in the city. I live in the district. I work in the district. I support the district. I go to church in the district. I understand the district from very nuanced perspectives. And I am not a career politician. I'm just a common person striving to fight the good fight to help people who look just like me, right? Mm-hmm. The common person. And oftentimes we want to jump on the bandwagon and talk about experience and this person has experience or that person has experience. But the truth of the matter is, at some point, none of us had the experience, and we had to build that experience, and we had to fight to get to the places that we are going. So that's what makes me the best candidate. I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to fight with you, and I'm willing to fight for you. There is not a greater candidate in this race who's going to outwork me, who's going to outthink me, who's going to outsmart me, because I'm doing the work and I'm striving to do an even greater work to get this done, because it's important to me that we have representation downstate that is going to stand up for East Cleveland just like they stand up for Shaker Heights, because both of those citizens in both of those areas are very important, and not going to kowtow to one citizenry versus another. And I am the candidate who will be willing to work across the district and fight for what is good. My campaign slogan is, when you see a good fight, get in it, and this is the fight that we're getting in. My name is Vincent E.Stokes II. I'm running for state representative in District 22, and I approve that message.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes, and thank you for coming in today. And for those of you that are listening that live within this district, you heard from Mr. Stokes today. You heard from one of his opponents on last Saturday. So if you have not already made your decision, you heard both of their stands on these issues. We talked to both of them regarding the same issues, and you can make your decision. So you've been listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. We thank you, Mr. Stokes, and we'll be right back with you in our second hour. In our second hour, we're going to talk about the billion-dollar profits that the gun industry have made over the last decade, selling automatic military-style weapons. Our sports topic, we're going to look at what's going to happen here as the Major League Baseball trade deadline approaches, and we will also have an open forum. We'll be back at you after these commercials and music.
Thank you. Did we talk for a straight hour?
Yes, sir.
It wasn't no commercial. Oh, wow.
So I'm glad you took this.
I can walk a little further, show you how to dance when it rains. You can be my closer. I just don't know how to love you the same. You don't love me like you want me. So that was too alive. Love you is so okay, but it feels like we're out of time. I wish you knew what you wanted. Stop pushing me away. We could be somebody. You and I together. You're not mine. You don't.
Thank you, sir.
Let me get a picture real quick.
Right here?
Yep. Has violence happened to you or your family? Violence can affect all parts of your life, sometimes in ways you can't see. Violence can affect the way you eat, sleep. It causes you to lose focus, feel angry, afraid, or even use drugs or drinking as a way to escape. But we're here to tell you that violence doesn't have to keep hurting, and you can change your life starting now with help from the Trauma Recovery Center. We want you to take control of your life. Today can be the day. The Trauma Recovery Center offers real help for real needs in real time. They offer services for food, clothes, safety, emotional support, and a whole lot more. So listen, don't let violence control you. You can break free, and TRC can help. Call the Trauma Recovery Center at 216-644-5487. They will come to you wherever you are. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They will give you the tools to rebuild your life and your health. Call today. They're free, they're 24/7 and confidential. So look, if you want out and don't know where to start, call the Trauma Recovery Center. The Trauma Recovery Center will help you take back your life after violence started today. Call today. Get the help you need today. If you call right now, they will respond immediately. I guarantee it. The number's on the screen, and if you're listening, 216-644-5487. The Trauma Recovery Center of Northeast Ohio, also affiliated with the Center for Families and Children. And finally, on our History 365, I just want to play a quick homage to Garrett Morgan of Cleveland, Ohio, originally from Claysville, Harrison County, Kentucky, but also a native here of Cleveland, Ohio, passed away July 27th of 1963. Garrett Morgan was an Afro-American inventor, businessman, and community leader. His most notable inventions were a 3-position traffic signal and a smoke hood, a predecessor to the gas mask, notably used in the 1916 tunnel construction disaster rescue. Morgan also discovered and developed the chemical hair processing and straightening solution we know as lye. He created a successful company based on his hair product inventions, along with a complete line of hair care products, and became involved in the civic and political advancement of African Americans, especially in and around Cleveland, Ohio. Garrett Morgan, Cleveland native, trailblazer in history, and we hope, side note, to see his statue up at the Culture Gardens in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Decisive for No Static Radio, and now back to Jeff Doggett and the right side. Got it.
Thank you, Decisive. Thank you. And thank you for that note on Garrett Morgan. Yes, proud. Even though he was not born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, spent most of his life in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes, so yes, since the age of 3 years old.
3 years old, so yes. He actually was raised in Cleveland, Ohio. So great inventor. Google him so that you can learn more about him. And yes, please get that statue in the Cultural Gardens. Once again, we want to thank candidate Vincent E.Stokes, who was in studio in the first hour. For those of you that are listening to this program that are in the 22nd district here in the state of Ohio, I hope that what you heard this week and what you heard last week will help you make your decision, if you have not done so already, as to who you are going to vote for in this very important primary that comes up on Tuesday. Here in the second hour, we've got open forum. Well, we have 2 topics, and we also have open forum. The 2 topics that we have on the floor, we're going to talk about some moves that we think might possibly happen at the Major League Baseball trading deadline, which comes up this Tuesday, August the 2nd, same day as Election Day. Also, we're going to talk about the recent hearings that were held on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, which revealed that gun makers here in the United States over the last decade have made a combined $1 billion on the sale, not of just all guns, period, but on the sale of military-style automatic weapons, AR-14s and AR-15 type of automatic weapons. They've made $1 billion, a billion with a B, like the money they gave away in the mega lottery on yesterday. Somebody in Chicago won.
Chicago?
Yes, somebody in
That's
Chicago
it?
became an instant billionaire yesterday. So, but these gun manufacturers didn't have to rely on the luck of the draw, but through slick and persuasive advertising, have made $1 billion over the last decade. So we're going to look at that as well in our second hour. Also, if there's something on your mind that you would like to talk about that we didn't put out here, you feel free to call us at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. So the Major League Baseball trade deadline is quickly approaching on August 2nd, which is this coming Tuesday. And unlike past years, there are more teams that are involved in various pennant races, be it for division titles or wild cards, as the Major Leagues has added one additional wild card in each league this year. So that this has really become a seller's market because there are several teams that are in contention for playoff spots. And after this August 2nd trade deadline, there can be no other transactions that take place. So, what are some of the things that we look forward to? Well, first of all, if you look at let's deal with the National League first. The Dodgers are basically running away with the NL West. The Padres and also the St. Louis Cardinals, who are locked in a battle with the Milwaukee Brewers to win the Central Division, but are also in the top tier in the wild card, along with the Atlanta Braves in the East, who are also locked in a division struggle with the New York Mets to be the division winners. And then at least, and then you have the Philadelphia Phillies on the outskirts too of the wild card. They're the couple games behind the last wild card spot in the National League. So as you see, there are quite a few teams that are alive in the National League. As you said, we got the Dodgers and the Padres in the West. You've got the Brewers and the Cardinals in the Central. And you've got and the Giants too in the West, but they faded. But they still, their playoff hopes have not extinguished yet. But they got out to a really poor start in the second half after the All-Star break. And in the East, you've got the Mets, the Braves, and the Phillies in the East that are competing for playoff spots. So you've got those teams out there, and they are all looking for assets. There have been some transactions that have taken place already. The Mets picked up Ryan Vogelbach from the Pirates, slugging outfielder, and they also picked up former Cleveland Indian outfielder from the Cincinnati Reds, Tyler Naquin. So they've made those moves. Their competitors, the Braves and the Phillies, have not made any moves yet. One of the rumors that has been put out there that the Phillies are looking to do, they're looking and have expressed, according to some reports, have expressed interest in Cleveland Guardian pitcher Zach Plesac. Be interesting to see if the Guardians would move off of Plesac, and if so, what they would get back in return from Philadelphia. The Guardians themselves need bullpen help, and they need a bat in the middle of the lineup, a power bat in the middle of the lineup, due to the disappointing season that they've got thus far from Franmil Reyes, who was counted on to be exactly that type of bat in the middle of their lineup. So there's those rumors out there. Then there's rumors with the Padres, and the big name that's out there that has been linked to several teams in both the American League and the National League is All-Star outfielder and home run derby champ of the Washington Nationals, Juan Soto, who recently turned down a 10-year, $440 million contract extension from his present team, the Washington Nationals, which just screamed the news that they're going to trade him. And he is the most coveted prize at the trade deadline, and he's been linked to several locations. There's been rumors that the Yankees were going to make an offer. There's been rumors that the Dodgers were going to make an offer. There's rumors that the Seattle Mariners were even going to make an offer, and it seems as though, at least rumor-wise, that the front runner for him are the San Diego Padres. But here's the deal, though. The Nationals, and rightfully so, are going to ask for a king's ransom haul in return for a player that is in his early 20s and is regarded by many as one of the best players in baseball. Now, average wise this year, he's not having a good year batting average wise, but his power numbers are good. They're a little off from what they have been in recent seasons, but everyone knows the potential there, and that he's potential not only to be an all-star for many years, but some yours and yours truly included, see him one day walking into those hallowed halls at Cooperstown, as you will, as an inductee into the Hall of Fame. So whoever is going to trade for him, now the advantage of it is that you do have him under control for 2.5 seasons. You'll have him under control for the rest of this season, all of the 23 season, and all of the 24 season, as he does not become a free agent until the 2024 season. So from that standpoint, the team that would get him would not have to worry about trying to negotiate his contract until actually 2.5 seasons from now. But the downside of that for teams that would want to trade for him is the Nationals know that as well, so they don't necessarily have to trade him right now at this trade deadline because they still have another 2.5 years, or really another year and a half, because if they still have him in the last year of his contract, they're not going to really get anything at all for him of significance that was not going to equal his talent, but they're not going to get the haul that they would get should they trade him at the trade deadline now or next year. So those are the teams that are rumored out there. If you notice, they're all big market teams. Even the Giants have been mentioned. And of course, the reason for that is that his contract demand. If he's already turned down a $440 million 10-year contract extension from the Nationals, that's telling you that whoever does eventually land him and land his services, if they want to keep him for the rest of his career, they're going to have to pony up some big time money. So if you look at it that way, then the only teams that really are in play for him over the long haul would be those big market teams, the Yankees, the Mets, the Padres, and not because they're a big market team, but they're owned by a billionaire hedgehog fund owner who made his billions doing that. The Dodgers, who have the highest payroll in baseball now. The Giants, who have a big market and can afford to sign him as well. Possibly a dark horse in that would be the White Sox, but they have their own issues right now, and they have been one of, if not the most disappointing team in Major League Baseball, because they were picked at the beginning of the season to basically run away with the American League Central. As I picked them on this show, on our baseball preview show back in April, I picked them as the just odds-on favorites to win their division. They're not even playing 500 ball right now. They trail the Twins and the Guardians in the Central Division. So they've been mentioned too. And then there have been some outside mentions. Now, from where I sit, there's been some talk too that perhaps the Guardians would offer some type of package for them, which I don't see them doing. And the argument was this, that yes, we know that we wouldn't be able to keep him after his contract was up, but if you bring him to Cleveland now, given the state of the American League Central Division, that in all likelihood would make the Guardians the odds-on favorites to win the division this year, and make them the odds-on favorite to win the division in 2023 as well. And then once you get into the playoffs, anything can happen. That they would be more than just a division winner, that they would be a legitimate World Series contender, adding that bat in the lineup that already has MVP candidate Jose Ramirez, promising young players like Andres Gimenez, who came in the Frankie Lindor, excuse me, he doesn't want to be called Frankie, Francisco Lindor trade last year and was an all-star. He's only 22 years old. Rookie sensation Stephen Kwan, getting great contributions from rookies like Oscar Gonzalez, who's on the injured list right now, and also Nolan Jones, who is one of their top prospects. The argument is that if you add a bat like Juan Soto into that lineup to go along with the pitching that they have, that would make the Guardians an instant contender, not only to win the Central Division in the American League, but also make them World Series contenders. I don't really see them doing that, though. Number one, that's not their MO, to give up a bunch of prospects, which they would have to give up in order to land Juan Soto. I don't see them trying to gut their farm system to get a guy basically that they're only going to be able to keep under control for 2.5 years. Now, of course, the caveat to that is that they recently picked up a new minority owner and there's going to be an influx of cash. But even with that, I don't see them making that move because that is, as I said, that is not their MO. That's not how they operate. And I don't see them being able to pay Juan Soto the type of contract that he's going to demand. And there's been a couple other small market teams like Minnesota that was mentioned in it as well. But again, I don't see them as a serious contender for his services for the same reasons that I stated as a regard to the Guardians. So where do I think he's going to land? Well, at one moment, and I don't think it still cannot happen, but I thought the Seattle Mariners actually would be the front runners in it. But the Mariners went out on yesterday and traded 4 minor league prospects to the Reds for highly coveted right-hand starting pitcher Luis Castillo, which sent shockwaves around MLB because it was just assumed by everyone that the Yankees were going to trade for him. But the Mariners made that move late last night, and so they have Castillo. I don't know how many more prospects they have, what's the ranking of the prospects that they did trade for Castillo. Would they have enough prospects still in their system that would attract the Nationals and entice them into making a Soto deal? So now that steps up to the plate, steps up to Padres. I don't see the Yankees doing it only because the Yankees are trying to do whatever they can do to be able to keep their all-star player and likely MVP of the American League this year, Aaron Judge, who hit his 41st home run last night. And not only did he do that in the game, but he also made a stellar defensive play in the game last night that took a home run away. And Aaron Judge turned down a contract offer from the Yankees at the beginning of this season to bet on himself, and now he's having an MVP type season. And so I don't see them making the move to bring Soto in. I see them more so trying to do whatever they can do to keep Judge from leaving the Bronx, and especially going to their crosstown rivals in Queens, and that's the Mets. That could happen. So nothing would surprise me and nothing would shock me. So I'm not saying that the Yankees won't do it, but I don't see that. I don't see them in the picture. So that eliminates them, at least in my mind. I believe that the Mariners are eliminated, at least in my mind, based on prospects that they gave up yesterday and then landing one to Luis Castillo, which will really help their pitching staff. Also, which also already has reigning AL Cy Young winner Robbie Ray from last year, who they had acquired in the free agency in the offseason from who formerly pitched for the Blue Jays. So that gives them a formidable pitching staff. They're not going to catch the Astros for some reason. They can't beat Houston. They got swept by Houston last weekend in Seattle. Houston then turned around and did something that no one saw coming and got swept by the A's in the subsequent series, the lowly A's in the subsequent series. But now they've been playing the Mariners in the 4-game series over the weekend in Houston, and Houston won the first 2 games of that series on Thursday night and last night. So the Mariners aren't going to catch the Astros, but by getting Luis Castillo, that solidifies their starting pitching staff, and they should make a strong run for the wild card. And if they stay healthy, remember they were my preseason pick to win the West, and then when they were floundering 8 and 9 games below 500, it really made me look like I had egg on my face. Well, they're not going to win the West, but with this pickup of Luis Castillo, I do see them being one of the wild cards in the American League. Do they have enough capital, though, to bring in Juan Soto to go with all likelihood and hands down AL Rookie of the Year, Julio Rodriguez, who now I did get that one right. He's going to be the AL Rookie of the Year this year unless he completely collapses the rest of the year. But he's got that all but sold up. But do they have the prospect capital to interest Washington enough into trading Juan Soto there? I don't think they do. They have it either. So that eliminates Seattle, at least from my perspective. So now that leaves the Dodgers, the Padres, possibly the Mets for this year. So let's look at those 3 teams. So the Dodgers, the Nationals have made trades with the Dodgers before. Last year, trading star players to the Dodgers to get prospects in return. Last year, at the trade deadline, if you remember, the Nationals traded their all-star shortstop, Trey Turner, to the Dodgers along with all-star pitcher Max Scherzer, who was at the end of his contract. And Max Scherzer, as you well know, if you follow it, signed with the Mets in the offseason as a free agent. So they've already made those deals. Do the Dodgers have enough in their system that would entice the Nationals? And would the Dodgers want to take on that payroll, given the fact that the Dodgers have close to a $200 million payroll as it is, as they're paying Mookie Betts, as they're paying Trey Turner, as they do have, as we said, the highest payroll in baseball? Do they want to take on more of that payroll? Well, possibly. Reason being is that, A, they can afford it, given their television contract, their local television contract that they have, and that the fact that they sell out, draw about close to 50,000 a night in home games there, Chavez Ravine, there in Los Angeles. So they have the revenue from their television contract, from their ticket sales and merchandise sales to do it. Also, they may be getting some relief salary-wise as Clayton Kershaw is getting near the end of the line there. So they may be getting salary relief from him within the next couple of years. So I wouldn't be surprised that if they did make a strong play for Juan Soto and to get him there in their lineup. Also, too, who I think are still in the running for it is their division rivals, the Padres, who really need pitching, though, especially relief pitching, especially since their closer, Taylor Rogers, who was formerly closer of the Minnesota Twins, has fallen on hard times here lately, so much to the point that he is no longer the closer for the Padres. So they really need to focus on pitching, but they may go for it. Their owner is one that likes to make a big splash. And if you think about it, thinking about the top of the lineup that would have Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Manny Machado in it, to go along with steady veteran Eric Hosmer and others that they have on that team. So I can see them doing it. And I can also see the Mets doing it as well. Personally, I don't think that Soto is going to get moved this year at the trade deadline. As I said, the Nationals don't have to trade him right now. It's not as though his contract is up at the end of this season or even at the end of next season. So they can afford to hold on to him. I think the move for him is going to be done in the offseason at the winter baseball meetings when teams can really assess where they are, what type of season they have this year, if he's the missing piece to get them over the top, and then I think they can make that deal. So now that being said, watch him get traded on Tuesday. But he's the biggest piece. The biggest pitching piece fell last night to the Mariners. For my own team here, the Guardians, as I said, they need a big bat in the middle of the lineup. I don't really see any out there that are available right now for them. Could they use an upgrade at catcher, as their catchers Luke Maley and also Austin Hedges are very good defensively and call good games, but neither one of them are much at the plate. And in the lineup, if the Guardians had a lineup, say like the Yankees or the Dodgers or the Padres or even the underachieving White Sox, they could afford to carry catchers that can't hit in that lineup. But when you look at the bottom of that lineup, some nights where you have Ernie Clement in the lineup at the bottom of the lineup, and then also to go with the catchers, there's too many outs in that lineup. So they may make a move to upgrade offensively catcher. If they do that, then look for them to make a trade offer to the Oakland A's for their catcher, Sean Murphy, who's really, he's not really hitting that much. I think he's hitting like 241, but he does have 11 home runs. So they may make an offer like that. They really do need bullpen help, though. And that is a need across Major League Baseball, across teams that are contending. One of the reasons why the Guardians, as a matter of fact, are only a game out of first place as of today. Now, their results of today may change that, but the reason why they're in the race now is that recently they played the first place Minnesota Twins in early July, late June, early July, in back-to-back series where they played them 8 times within the period of a week. And they were able to win 5 of those 8 games. But the reason that they won those games is that they trailed in all of those games late in the game and were able to come back against the Twins bullpen, which if the Twins did not blow leads late in the game, the Guardians would be basically out of the race right now. So the Twins are looking for bullpen help. They need a closer. They need setup. They need bullpen help. The White Sox need bullpen help as their closer, Liam Hendricks, when he can't go, they have issues there closing out games. And so as you look across the Major League, I already told you about the Padres. If you look across the landscape of Major League Baseball, these contenders, be they contenders for the division crown or for some wild card spots, they all need bullpen help. The Blue Jays need bullpen help. The Rays can use some starting pitching and bullpen help. Another playoff contender. The Orioles have snuck in there as a pleasant surprise contender for the wild card, and they need help, and they have to make a decision. Welcome to the Right Side, caller. State your name and where you're calling from.
Hey, Jeff, this is Jonathan calling from Hudson, and I was listening to you talking about the Guardians and their chances of making it into the playoffs at the end of the season. Do you think it's our best chance is as a wild card team, or do you think we can overtake the Minnesota Twins?
I think their best chance to make it in the playoffs is to win the division. If I look at the rest of their schedule, they're in a tough part of it now. So far, they've come through pretty well. They split with Chicago. They split with Boston. They won the first game of the series against the Rays last night, and last I checked, they were trailing 5-1 in the game against the Rays today. I don't know what the final of that was, but so this 11-game stretch that they've come through, they played pretty well through it. They managed to keep their heads above water during this, and the schedule gets a lot easier after this. Yes, they do have a 4-game set with the Astros next weekend, here in Cleveland. But it gets a little easier then as they'll be playing the Diamondbacks. They've got 6 games still with the Royals. They've still got a bunch of games left with the Tigers, and they're going to be going up against teams that they'll be fighting for a playoff spot with. They've yet to play the Mariners, so they've got 6 games with the Mariners. They've got a couple of games left with the Padres, but they've got a lot of Royals, Tigers, Rangers, Orioles. Even though the Orioles aren't the pushovers that they were. It's interesting to see what they're going to do at the trade deadline, though. Do they really? The trade deadline for the Orioles will really let us know whether their ownership really believes that they're really a contender this year. So, but to answer your question, though, Jonathan, I think their best bet. Do they have an outside shot at the wild card? Yes. But when I look at teams like the Blue Jays, and also perhaps maybe the Mariners, even especially since the Mariners picked up Luis Castillo yesterday from the Reds, and even the Rays. And I look at the Guardians, I think that they may be a little too much for them to try to overcome all of those teams to be a wild card. But the Central Division that they're in, Jonathan, is very winnable. The Chicago White Sox are without a doubt the most disappointing team in all of Major League Baseball, in my opinion. Now, all these experts and analysts keep saying, well, the White Sox are 1 week away, and they're gonna, when they take off, they can go on a run and win this division. But what they fail to point out is that the White Sox have really not played good baseball since the second half of last season. They had a great first half of last season. They had a so-so second half of the season last year, and they've underachieved all of this year. And they're the worst defensive team in baseball. They've got issues in their bullpen. Their starting pitching with Lance Lynn, who got bombed last night by the A's, has been disappointing this year. Lucas Giolito, ERA is higher this year than it's ever been in his career. Now, with Dylan Cease, they've got a bona fide ace there. But even their lineup, everybody talks about the potential firepower in that lineup. And true, they've had injuries, but Moncada, and Tim Anderson, who made the All-Star, and Jose Abreu, and Luis Robert, and the rest of that, and Jimenez in that lineup, they have underachieved this year. They're not even 500 this late in the season. We're almost to August, and they're still below 500. So
yeah, that's true.
You look at the White Sox, and I mean the Twins. Do the Twins really scare you with that bullpen that they have? Those fire starters they have out there in the bullpen. So this is a very winnable division. So I look.
I'm sorry, Jeff. How many more games do we have to play against the Minnesota Twins?
They've got another. They got 8 more games. They got another 5-game series here and another 3-game series in Minnesota. That's in September.
Okay.
They've got.
See, I'm like you. I'm leaning toward the Guardians overtaking the Twins because there's too many good teams vying for the playoff spot in the American League. And I don't think we could be one of them. Now, is it correct? There's actually 3 in American League and nationally, 3 wild card teams.
Right. Okay. So here's how the playoffs set up. So in each league, the teams that have the best record. So right now, if the playoffs were to start today, in the American League, the Yankees and the Astros would get byes. The Twins would play the team with the worst record as a wild card, and then the other 2 wild card teams would play each other, and then it goes from there. And then the same thing in the National League. And so the Guardians are not going to get a bye. They're not going to overtake the Yankees or the Astros to get one of the top 2 records in the American League. But this division, Jonathan, is very winnable if they can stay healthy. I don't know what they can add at the trade deadline. They desperately need a power bat in the middle of that lineup. But what has hurt them all year is the lack of production that they've gotten from Franmil Reyes. They were counting on him. Because Franmil Reyes last year, and if you remember, Jonathan, last year, he missed a month of the season, and yet he had 30 home runs last year. So you project that over an entire season, had he stayed healthy, he would have had close to 40, if not more than 40 home runs last year. Well, now, this year, he only has 9 home runs, and we're at August.
Yeah,
You know,
he's been a major disappointment. I don't know if health-wise he keeps himself in shape or not. Jeff, when is Oscar Gonzalez coming off? I know he's been playing in the minor leagues rehab. Is he going to be brought up soon?
Well, he may be brought back next week when they're home because he's been playing in Akron all week since Tuesday. So he's been in the lineup on a daily basis down in Akron, the Guardians double A affiliate, for this entire week. So there's a possibility that he'll be called up, and that will be after. So you know what, Jonathan? I don't think he will get called up until Tuesday or later. And the reason I say that, of course, is Tuesday is the trade deadline, and was remain to be seen what they're going to do at the trade deadline to either get a power bat in here in the middle of this lineup, or to get some bullpen help that they need. Now, the Diamondbacks, who interestingly will be here on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. So they'll be here during the trade deadline. They've got a player on their team, his last name is Peralta, who would be very interesting for the Guardians to try to acquire. Now, he's an outfielder, so it makes you wonder where would he play when you've got Quan, you've got Gonzalez, and you've got Nolan Jones out there in the outfield. But could he possibly be traded for and become an outfielder / DH, which means then that if that were to take place, that's what Franmil Reyes is. So that means, in all likelihood, Franmil Reyes would be gone. So we'll see what they do there. So when he will be back, I do believe he will be back. And I think it's going to be sometime next week, but it's going to be curious to see what the Guardians do at the trade deadline, because I don't think, even in their heart of hearts, I mean, they don't go into the season thinking they're going to lose, but, true serum given to Tito and the front office of Chernoff and Antonetti. If you would have given them truth serum at the beginning of the year, they would not have told you that they would expect this team to win the division. So now it's there. Why not go for it?
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So basically, what we're just going to have to wait and see until the trading deadline to see what the Guardians are going to do. I agree, and that's what they should do. Before I hang up, and one more subject, I just want to bring up, this is just my opinion, and just like you said, we really don't know what's going to happen with the Deshaun Watson situation, but I did hear by the end of next week, Friday, we should have a ruling. And Jeff, I'm speculating. I'm going to say that the judge is going to rule 6 to 8 games with, of course, the Deshaun Watson appealing it. So I'm hoping maybe it just be only 6 games. And if the Browns defense can be really, really tough the first 8 games of the season while we wait for Deshaun Watson to come back, maybe we can come out 6-2 or 5-3. What's your take?
Well, if he gets 8 games and he appeals it and they knock it down to 6, that would be good. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's 8 games. He doesn't appeal. He serves 8 games. So the first 4 games of the year are at Carolina, home to the Jets, at Atlanta, and home to Pittsburgh on Thursday night. So those are fair. Even with Jacoby Brissett, who I'm not a big fan of, I think there's a reason that Jacoby Brissett has bounced around to 3 different franchises in his career. That's what you call a journeyman. Started off with the Patriots, went to the Colts, and was with the Dolphins last year. If Deshaun Watson gets 8 games and somehow under Brissett they can go 4-4 or at the worst 3-5, then I think that in the 9 games that Watson plays, assuming that he can remain healthy, assuming that the timing will be there, which is crucial because if you think about it, Jonathan, he would not have played in a competitive game since 2020. So, it'd be almost 2.5 years since he played a competitive game. But if he can remain healthy the last 9 games and he can fairly quickly adjust to the timing, then I think they can go 7-2 in the games that he plays, which means if they go 4-4 or even 3-5 in the games he doesn't play, then you're looking at a 10 to 11 win team that with those amount of wins in all likelihood are going to make you a playoff team. And now, once you get in the playoffs, and I'm going to get to your question about the Browns defense in a minute, once you get to the playoffs with Deshaun Watson and that and his skill set, then all bets are off. Now, the Cleveland defense potentially, and now they've had a year under their belt of Joe Wood's system, so there's no adjustments now to be made like there were in the beginning of the season last year. They were adjusting to the system, and you saw some not so good, not so well played games last year by the team, especially against the Chargers and against the Patriots and other games like that. Now that they have a year under their belt in Joe Wood's system, Jonathan, look at it this way. On every level of the defense, you could make the argument that they have a difference maker on each level. The difference maker, of course, on the D-line is Myles Garrett. The difference maker potentially in the linebacker core is J.O.K., Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. The playmaker in the secondary, and again, this is a huge if he can stay healthy, is Denzel Ward. So when you have on each level of your defense a difference maker on each level, and it's yet to be proven that JOK is that. He has the potential to be so, but until you do it, you're not it. But when you have that, you've got the type of defense that can be in the top 5, and that's what I expect from them this year, Jonathan. I expect the Cleveland defense, especially early in the season, during the amount of games that Watson is suspended, I expect the Cleveland defense to carry the team and to be the strong suit of that team until they get Watson back. Their issue, of course, is stopping the run. Their big question marks is at defensive tackle where they're young and unproven. So that remains to be seen. Also, Myles Garrett is a great pass rusher, but so against the run. But then on the other side, you do have Jadeveon Clowney, who's a better run stopper than he is a pass rusher. So you've got that. So as I said, so when you look at a defense, and you look at a defense that has a difference maker, a potential Pro Bowler, well, you have 2 bona fide Pro Bowlers in Myles Garrett and on the line and Denzel Ward in the secondary. If JOK is going to be what I think he's going to be, and I'm not saying he's this player, Jonathan, and those of you listening, so please don't say Jeff has gone completely off of the rocker, but JOK reminds me of, not saying he's going to be, but he reminds me of Troy Polamalu. So if he can even approach that level, again, I'm not saying that he is Polamalu. Palomalu's in the Hall of Fame. I'm not ready to give JOK a bust in Canton yet. But if he can approach that level, then you've got a Pro Bowler on the D-line, you've got a Pro Bowler as a linebacker, and you've got a Pro Bowler in the secondary. So on each level of the defense, you have a Pro Bowler, which means that translates into you having a top-notch defense, one of the top-notch defenses in the league. I haven't even mentioned Greg Newsome who had a breakthrough rookie season last year. I haven't even mentioned Grant Delpit, who played well last year. I haven't even mentioned John Johnson III, whose play picked up in the second half of the season once he adjusted to the scheme of Joe Wood. I haven't even mentioned them. So when you look at that and you look at the depth at the position, especially in the secondary, I think the Browns are going to have one of the best, if not the best secondary in the league, especially when you look at the depth that they have there in that secondary. But the question marks on the defense, Jonathan, are that D-line stopping the run, and especially when you play in the AFC North, when you're going to see Joe Mixon twice, when you're going to see the young man in Pittsburgh twice a year, and you're going to go against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in that running game twice a year. You've got to be able to stop the run.
But you know what, Jeff? Getting back to key, I'm very confident, Jeff, like you said, with the defense. I really feel the key on the Browns offense the first 8 games of the season. Now, we know the other teams are going to stack the line because they know they have Jacoby Brissett quarterbacking. What the Browns need to do with Kareem Hunt and the other runner,
Nick
memory
Chubb.
loss now. The other one,
Nick Chubb.
Yeah. What they need to do is, it's important to help Jacoby Brissett out. Kareem Hunt is very good at pass and catching the ball coming out of the backfield, and that might take some of the pressure of the other defense stacking against the line, because that's like having another receiver having Kareem Hunt coming out of the backfield. So I think that's going to be important if the Browns' strategy offense is to really use Kareem Hunt in the passing game, so always Jacoby Brissett has an option to throw the ball to if he's having difficulty with throwing to the receivers. But like you said, he is a journeyman quarterback, and so we'll just have to wait and see and see what happens. But I'm pretty confident. And like you said, we're just speculating, but we really don't know until the judge decides maybe at the end of next week how many games Deshaun Watson is going to be out. So we'll just, as you said, Jeff, we'll just have to wait and see, buddy. Okay?
Yes, we will. Well, listen, Jonathan,
okay.
Thank you for your call, and thanks for listening.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
You as well. So I'll close the program today on our third topic, because I want to hit this topic before we close. We're not going to have a zero and hero of the week this week. I'm going to close on this, because this is very important. I want you all just give you this food for thought to chew on for the rest of the week. On Wednesday, there was an investigation by the House Oversight and Reform Committee of the manufacturers of firearms here in the United States. And what they found in this investigation, in this committee hearing, they have witnesses, and we'll get to those witnesses in just a moment, is that the firearms that were used in some of the nation's most deadliest mass shootings some of the firearms that have been used in the nation's most deadliest mass shootings, i.e., automatic military-style weapons, that gun manufacturers in the last decade have made $1 billion $1 billion in revenue off the sale of these military-style assault weapons in the last decade. Now, they did this various ways, but the greatest way they did it by enticing civilians to purchase these type of weapons. And how they did it, they especially targeted young males. And how they did it so subtly. What they did is that they referenced extremist groups by using imagery of these extremist groups to market their assault weapons to young males. For example, the weapon that was used by Peyton Gendron, the Buffalo shooter, the company that made that weapon had a marketing campaign, and they pulled the ad down. It was a poster ad where they showed a young child holding a assault weapon, and on the campaign poster it said, and I quote, they used misused Bible scripture, said, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and that when he grows old, he will not depart from it," and had the child holding the military assault weapon. So that's about as subtle as a brick. But the committee chairwoman, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, said that the companies market these weapons to youth, preying upon young men's insecurities and even appealing to white supremacists. Oh, no surprise there. Christopher Killoy, president and CEO of Sturm Ruger and Company, and also Marley Daniels, the CEO of Daniels Defense, which that was the company that the weapon that Peyton Gendron used, that was manufactured by Daniel Defense. They were there on Capitol Hill. Now, the CEO of Smith & Wesson was not there, and there's talk of subpoenaing him. But they were there on Capitol Hill to give testimony. You know what their testimony was, folks? Their testimony was that, I'm, you know, uh, I'm shocked. I know you're going to be shocked when you hear this. Their testimony was not that the gun kills people, but the person who's holding the gun kills. In other words, the gun is just an inanimate object. And the person, do we have a caller on the line? Caller, are you there? Maybe I'm just getting some feedback. So they're saying, in other words, that it's not the weapon itself that kills, it's the person who is wielding the weapon that kills. You know, in other words, guns don't kill, people do. But listen, and as we said last hour when we had candidate Stokes here in studio, and we are getting feedback. Marie, do you hear that feedback? Do we have a caller on the line? So that's that old argument that guns don't kill, but that people do. But the insanity in this, folks, is that these type of weapons were never supposed to be manufactured in the first place to be get in the hands of those of individual private citizens. There is no law enforcement group that is in favor of this. There is no one who wants sensible gun reform. We're not talking about taking guns away from people. We're talking about making it illegal for citizens to hold military-style weapons. Is there a caller on the line, or do you hear that feedback? It seems like there's some feedback coming through. Do we have a caller on the line? If so, caller, state your name and where you're calling from. If not, so this was the argument that they gave. Now, they also pointed out that Smith & Wesson, in their sales of automatic weapons, made $625 million over the last decade. And again, this is the sale. I'm not talking about pistols and rifles or anything of that nature. We're talking about the sale of military-style weapons that they are knowingly and intentionally marketing primarily to young men. And a lot of these young men are young men that have insecurities, openly marketing them to white supremacist groups and also militias and things of this nature, military-style weapons. And yet they come on Capitol Hill and make the argument that it's not the weapon itself that's doing the killing, it's the person that's holding it. Well, duh, of course the person that's holding it. But what you have failed to answer, or what you so conveniently chose not to answer, is why is the person holding the weapon in the first place when the weapon is manufactured and is made for the use of military trained combat soldiers? Why won't you answer that question, CEO? CEO Daniels, why won't you answer that question? Why won't you answer the question as to why you feel it necessary? Listen, you're going to make your money. You can get government contracts to sell these weapons to the military where they belong. Nobody's trying to put you out of business. Nobody's trying to say that you can't make a profit. But for you to sit there with a straight face and repeat that line of equine feces, equine being a horse, and you know what feces is. That, well, it's not the gun that kills, it's the person holding it. Well, of course it is. But again, you fail to answer the question is why is it that the gun is even in the hand of this individual citizen in the first place? Why was Peyton Gendron able to get that weapon that you manufactured, Mr. Daniel? Why was the shooter in Highland Park and the shooter at Parkland and the shooter in San Bernardino, why were they able to get that automatic rifle, CEO of Smith & Wesson? Because that's in those three mass shootings, the one in Highland Park on the 4th of July, the one at Parkland high school in Florida back on Valentine's Day in 2018, and the San Bernardino mass shooting. All of those were automatic weapons, automatic rifles produced and sold and manufactured by Smith & Wesson, who made $625 million in profits over the last decade selling military-style assault weapons. So yeah, the gun doesn't kill. What kills is the person who holds the gun. Okay. But why are private citizens holding these weapons? Why are you manufacturing? Why are you using an ad campaign, Mr. Daniel, of a child with an automatic rifle? Why are you marketing the AR-14 to young children? I guess they need something to practice on. I guess a future mass shooter needs a weapon he can practice on to hone his craft, so that when he gets ready to gun down a whole classroom of students and a teacher, or when he gets ready to walk into a grocery store and gun down shoppers, or he gets ready to walk into a mall and gun down people there in the mall, or gun down people at a country and western concert, or walk into a Walmart and gun down people there. I guess he needs something to practice on to hone his craft. You failed to answer that question. So you know what? I guess we do have the zero of the week after all. And the zero of the week are those two gentlemen who came up on Capitol Hill and testified that it's not the gun that kills people, but it's the people with the gun that they should not have in the first place that kills people. You've been listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. Once again, we want to remind all of you that on August 3rd, the states that have primaries on August 3rd, people, please go out and vote. If you have not voted already via absentee ballot or by mail, please go out, study the candidates, Google them, find out where they stand on the issues, and then be an educated voter and make your decision. And remember, one election is not going to change anything. It's going to be a catalyst of the start of a change. But sitting at home is not going to do anything but allow someone else to make a decision for you that's going to affect your life. been listening to the right side on No Static Radio, but right now I see that my time is up. Thank you very much for your time. And until next Saturday at 3 p.m., shalom.
We'd like to thank you for listening to and tuning in and watching The Right Side with your host, Jeff Doggett, on the station where we don't bring no static, but we sure enough bring the noise, nostaticradio.net. Make sure you guys check us out on social media where we absolutely love to hear from you on Facebook.com/NoStaticRadio LLC, on Twitter at NoStatic_radio, on Instagram at DReal_NoStaticRadio, and on YouTube at No Static Radio. Also, if you guys would like to listen to replays of this show and others on NoStaticRadio.net, please make sure you check us out on Mixer.com or Mixcloud.com. Just type in No Static Radio on the toolbar for replays of this show and others. And for continuous streaming, that means no rebuffering, no refreshing the page. Just sit back, relax, and wait for your next show to pop up. Check us out on tunein.com, liveonlineradio.net, or MediaQ for continuous streaming of this show and all others. And for all things No Static Radio, including up-and-coming events, merchandise, and then look at all our great show hosts and our new store, check us out at www.nostaticradio.net. Thank you so much for tuning in on this sensational Saturday. You know what it is. We've got more music for your listening pleasure, hearing your voice to the revolution on staticradio.net. Powered by Google, sponsored by Lamont Avenue Wines, the Cleveland Rugby League, and Design Me exclusively. Be safe, be well, and you guys have a great weekend.